Malik Carter had learned to make himself small in a world that rarely noticed kids like him. But when Sophia Hale collapsed in the garden of her father's billion-dollar estate, something inside him refused to stay quiet. The staff dismissed it as another episode. The doctors called it behavioral. And when Malik tried to tell them what he'd discovered, they laughed at him, told him to mind his own business. But there was one thing none of them understood about the 10-year-old boy from a one-room apartment he had been watching, and he had seen what everyone else missed. And today Malik was going to prove that sometimes the clearest eyes belong to those who have nothing to lose. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the cracked pavement as 10-year-old Malik Carter sat on the curb outside the towering gates of the Hale estate. His backpack rested beside him, worn at the edges but carefully patched by his mother's steady hands. Inside were his school books and the old tablet she'd saved for months to buy him. He glanced at his watch, the one with the faded Spider-Man face, and knew his mom had at least another hour of cleaning before they could head home. Their apartment was small, just one room really, with a kitchen area separated by a thin curtain, but it was theirs. His mother worked long hours scrubbing floors and polishing silverware in the mansion behind those iron gates, and Malik never complained about waiting. He understood sacrifice. He understood hard work. What he didn't understand yet was how much his patience would change everything. Malik stood and walked along the stone wall that bordered the property, peering through gaps in the ornamental bars. The Hale estate sprawled before him like something from a movie. Manicured lawns that seemed to stretch forever, marble fountains and gardens filled with flowers he couldn't name. And there, sitting alone beneath an old oak tree, was the girl. He'd seen her before. Sophia. The workers whispered about her when they thought no one was listening. Special, they'd say, tapping their temples. Different. But Malik only saw what was obvious, a kid sitting by herself while everyone else ignored her. Sophia wore bright pink headphones, the kind that covered her whole ears. Her dark hair fell in waves around her shoulders, and she was hunched over a sketch pad, drawing with intense focus. A woman in a gray uniform sat on a bench nearby, scrolling through her phone, barely glancing at the girl. Malik watched as Sophia worked, her hand moving in quick, precise strokes. She seemed peaceful, content even. Then, without warning, she went completely still. The crayon fell from her hand. Her body froze like someone had pressed pause on a video. Her eyes stared forward, unfocused and empty. Then came the trembling, subtle at first, just a slight shake in her shoulders, but growing more pronounced with each passing second. Malik's heart hammered in his chest. He gripped the bars of the gate, wanting to call out, but not knowing if he should. The caretaker finally looked up from her phone, sighed heavily, and walked over to Sophia with all the urgency of someone checking the time. "Another one of her episodes," the woman muttered to herself, placing a hand on Sophia's shoulder. "Come on, sweetie, let's get you inside." But Sophia didn't move. She just sat there, trembling and distant, until finally, after what felt like an eternity, she blinked slowly and slumped forward. The dazed expression on her face made Malik's stomach twist. Something was wrong. This wasn't just different. This was something else entirely. The caretaker helped Sophia to her feet and guided her toward the house. That's when Malik saw him. Richard Hale himself, striding across the lawn in an expensive suit, phone pressed to his ear, face carved from stone. "No, no, no." Richard's voice carried across the garden. "I don't care what the doctor said. My daughter is fine. Do you understand me?" "Fine." He ended the call and turned on the caretaker, who'd just gotten Sophia to the patio. "What happened?" "She just had one of her moments, Mr. Hale. Nothing serious." "Nothing serious?" Richard's jaw clenched. You're supposed to keep her calm. Your job is to make sure she doesn't get stressed. Clearly you can't handle that. Sir, I didn't. You're done. Pack your things. Richard turned away, dismissing her with a wave. And someone tell Collins, I don't want to hear another word about doctors or medical tests or any of that nonsense around my daughter. Is that clear? Malik watched the whole scene unfold, his hands still gripping the cold bars. He couldn't see Sophia's face from where he stood, but he saw the way she flinched at her father's voice. He saw the fear flash in her eyes before she was ushered inside by another staff member. That night, back in their small apartment, Malik couldn't stop thinking about what he'd witnessed. His mother hummed softly as she prepared their dinner, pasta with butter and the last of the Parmesan cheese. She looked tired, deep circles under her eyes, but she smiled when she noticed him staring at his tablet instead of doing homework. "What's got you so focused, baby?" she asked, setting a plate in front of him. "Mom, what do you know about autism?" Mrs. Carter paused, wooden spoon halfway to her mouth. "Where's this coming from?" "Just curious. There's this girl at the mansion, Sophia. She wears headphones all the time and doesn't really talk to anyone." His mother's expression softened with understanding. "Mr. Hale's daughter. Yes, she's autistic. Why are you asking?" "I saw her today. She just froze. Like completely froze. And then she was shaking." "Is that normal?" Mrs. Carter sat down across from him, reaching for his hand. "Baby, listen to me. What happens in that house isn't our business. Mr. Hale has doctors and specialists and all kinds of people to help Sophia. You focus on your schoolwork, okay?" "But Mom?" "Malik." Her voice was firm but gentle. "That's rich people's business. We can't get involved." But Malik couldn't let it go. After dinner, while his mother showered, he searched on his tablet. He typed in autism seizures and sudden freezing episodes and shaking. The results filled his screen with medical terms he didn't fully understand, but certain words jumped out at him. Epilepsy, absence seizures, triggers. He read until his eyes burned, until his mother called him to bed. And even then, lying on the pull-out couch they shared, he couldn't sleep. He kept seeing Sophia's blank stare, the fear in her eyes when her father yelled. Over the next few days, Malik paid closer attention. He arrived at the gates earlier, watched longer. He noticed patterns. Sophia came to the garden every afternoon around 3 o'clock. She always wore her pink headphones. She always brought her sketch pad. And sometimes, not every day but often enough, she would freeze just like before. One afternoon, Malik brought something with him. It was a small wooden puzzle he'd made in his school's shop class, just simple pieces that fit together to make a square. Nothing fancy, but he'd sanded it smooth and it felt good in his hands. He waited until Sophia was alone, the new caretaker having stepped away to answer a phone call. Then, working up his courage, Malik called through the bars. "Hey, hi." Sophia didn't look up. "My name's Malik. I made this." He held up the puzzle. "Do you want to see it?" Still nothing. But then, slowly, Sophia's head turned. She looked at him. Really looked at him. And something shifted in her expression. Curiosity, maybe. She stood and walked toward the gate, moving carefully, deliberately. When she reached the bars, she extended one hand through the gap. Malik placed the puzzle pieces in her palm. Sophia examined them, turning them over, running her fingers along the smooth edges. Then, to his amazement, she began fitting them together. Her movements were quick and precise, like she could see the solution before she even touched the pieces. "You're really good at that," Malik said softly. Sophia didn't respond with words, but she looked at him again, and this time there was something different in her eyes. Recognition. Connection. "Sophia, come inside." A sharp voice cut through the moment. The new caretaker had returned, looking annoyed. We don't talk to strangers. Sophia clutched the puzzle pieces and hurried back toward the house. But just before she disappeared through the door, she turned and looked at Malik one more time. He waved. She didn't wave back, but she held up the puzzle, showing him she still had it. That small gesture made Malik smile all the way home. After that day, Malik started noticing more. He saw how Sophia's eyes would twitch and squint when the automatic sprinklers turned on, the sunlight catching the water and creating dancing reflections across the lawn. He noticed how her hands trembled whenever she skipped the afternoon snack the caretaker tried to give her. He watched her retreat deeper into herself when the gardeners used their loud equipment nearby. She was trying to tell people what bothered her, he realized, but nobody was listening. The following week, the mansion buzzed with unusual activity. Fancy cars lined the circular driveway. Men and women in elegant clothes streamed through the front entrance. Malik's mother explained that Mr. Hale was hosting some big charity event, something about autism awareness. All those rich people in there talking about helping kids like Sophia, Mrs. Carter said, shaking her head. Meanwhile, they keep that poor girl locked upstairs because she's too unpredictable for company. Malik felt anger flare in his chest. That's not fair. No, baby, it's not. His mother squeezed his shoulder. But that's how their world works. That evening, as guests mingled and champagne flowed through the grand ballroom, Malik walked past the kitchen entrance. He heard the chef complaining to one of the servers. I don't know what they expect me to do. The girl hasn't eaten a proper meal in 2 days. Everything's the wrong texture, wrong temperature, wrong something. How am I supposed to feed someone who won't eat? Malik's mind raced. He remembered reading something about sensory issues and food. Without thinking it through, he slipped into the kitchen when no one was looking. On the counter sat a bowl of fruit, apples, oranges, and bananas. He grabbed one of the softer bananas and tucked it under his shirt. His heart pounded as he made his way through the servants' corridors. He'd watched his mother navigate these halls enough times to know the general layout. Up the back stairs, down the hall, toward where he thought Sophia's room might be. He found her sitting alone in a small reading nook near her bedroom, still wearing her pink headphones, staring out the window at the party guests below. When she saw Malik, her eyes widened, but not with fear, with something else. Relief, maybe. Hey, he whispered, pulling out the banana. I thought you might be hungry. Sophia looked at the fruit, then at him. Slowly, she removed one side of her headphones. Malik held his breath. She reached out, took the banana, and peeled it with careful precision. Then she ate it, bite by small bite, never taking her eyes off him. Better? He asked. Sophia nodded. Just a tiny movement, but definitely a nod. You know, you could tell them what you need. Draw it, maybe? Like you draw everything else? She tilted her head, considering this. Then she picked up her sketchpad from beside her and showed him. The pages were filled with intricate drawings, flowers, patterns, faces. But one drawing made Malik's stomach drop. It showed a girl, lying on the ground, surrounded by jagged lines like lightning bolts. Above her floated words in shaky letters. Help me. Before Malik could say anything, footsteps echoed down the hall. He quickly handed Sophia the rest of the banana and ducked behind a large decorative plant. A nurse walked past, checking rooms, and Malik used the moment to slip away, his mind reeling from what he'd seen. 2 nights later, disaster struck. Malik was waiting in the garden as usual when he heard screaming from inside the mansion. He ran to the gate, pressing his face against the bars. People were rushing around, voices overlapping in panic. Call someone. She hit her head. Where's the doctor? Malik didn't hesitate. He found the service entrance where his mother usually entered and slipped inside during the chaos. He followed the commotion to the main sitting room where Sophia lay on the floor, unconscious, a small cut bleeding from her temple. Sophia! Richard Hale knelt beside his daughter, his usual composure shattered. Somebody do something. A man in a suit, Malik assumed he was a doctor, checked Sophia's pulse and examined her briefly. She's stable. This is consistent with her condition. She probably just got overwhelmed and fainted. It happens with autistic children. Just her condition? Malik's voice cracked as he spoke, surprising everyone. All eyes turned to him. That's the second time this week. How is that just her condition? Who is this child? The doctor asked, looking annoyed. Mr. Collins, the butler, appeared at Malik's side, gripping his shoulder. This is one of the staff's children. Come along, boy. This isn't your concern. But it should be someone's concern. Malik pulled away, moving closer to Sophia. He knelt beside her, seeing the dazed expression he'd witnessed before. She's trying to tell you something's wrong, but nobody's listening. Young man, I assure you, the doctor began. Get him out of here, Richard said quietly, his voice hollow. Mr. Collins dragged Malik away, but not before the boy saw something that would haunt him. In Sophia's limp hand was her sketch pad, open to a new drawing. It showed a red bottle with an X over it, and next to it, a figure of a girl with tears streaming down her face. Later that night, after his mother had apologized profusely to Mr. Collins and promised to keep Malik away, they sat in their apartment in heavy silence. You can't do that, baby, Mrs. Carter said, though her voice lacked conviction. You can't just run into their house like that. But Mom, something's really wrong with her. The doctors aren't seeing it. Her dad isn't seeing it. I am. His mother looked at him with a mixture of pride and worry. And what exactly are you seeing? Malik pulled out his tablet and showed her his notes. He'd been keeping track. Dates, times, what Sophia was doing before each episode. It's always after lunch, always. And I heard the chef saying she hasn't been eating, but when I gave her that banana, she ate it fine. What if it's not her autism? What if it's something else? Mrs. Carter studied the screen, her expression shifting. Malik, even if you're right, who's going to listen to a 10-year-old? Then I'll make them listen. He met her eyes with fierce determination. I have to try, Mom. She doesn't have anyone else. The next day, Malik's mother was cleaning Richard Hale's office when Malik convinced her to let him wait inside rather than in the garden. While she dusted and vacuumed, Malik's eyes wandered to the massive desk where papers lay scattered. Among them were medical reports with Sophia's name. He couldn't read all the big words, but he caught enough. Seizures. Unknown cause. Behavioral management recommended. Consider residential facility. That last phrase made his blood run cold. They were thinking about sending her away. His mother called his name, pulling him away before he could read more. But as they left, Malik noticed a business card on the desk. Dr. Priya Sharma, pediatric neurologist. Someone had drawn a line through her name and written, "No longer consulting," in red ink. That evening, Malik searched for Dr. Sharma online and found her clinic. It took him 3 days to work up the courage, but finally he convinced his mother to take him there during her day off. Dr. Sharma was younger than he expected, with kind eyes and a warm smile. When Malik explained why he was there, she listened patiently, never once dismissing him or talking down to him. I tried to help Sophia, Dr. Sharma explained, her voice sad. But Mr. Hale's board thought I was causing unnecessary concern. They said I was making her condition seem worse than it was. So they pushed me out. But what if it is worse? Malik pulled out his tablet, showing her his notes. Look, every episode happens after lunch, every single one. Dr. Sharma studied his observations, her expression growing more serious. You documented all this? Yes, ma'am. And she drew this. He showed her a photo he'd taken of Sophia's drawing with the red bottle. I think she's trying to tell us something's making her sick. The doctor leaned back in her chair, processing this. The food. You think something in her food is triggering the episodes? I don't know for sure, but it's the only thing that makes sense. Malik, if you're right, this is very serious. But getting anyone to listen will be difficult. Mr. Hale made it very clear he doesn't want me involved anymore. Then we have to find another way, Malik said firmly. We have to help her. Over the next week, Malik became a detective. He started paying attention to everything related to Sophia's meals. He noticed that the kitchen had started using a new cleaning spray, one with a strong chemical smell. He saw the chef preparing Sophia's special lunches with particular packaged snacks that were different from what everyone else ate. One afternoon, Sophia came to the garden and handed Malik a new drawing. This one was more specific. A red bottle with text he could barely make out, but the girl next to it was clearly crying and holding her stomach. "Sophia, what is this?" Malik asked gently. She pointed at the bottle, then at her mouth, then at her head. She was trying to communicate, using the only way she knew how. Malik took a photo of the drawing and went straight to Mr. Collins. The butler was overseeing the setup for another event when Malik approached. "Sir, I need to show you something about Sophia." Mr. Collins barely glanced at him. "Boy, didn't your mother tell you to stay out of family business? But this is important. I think something in her food is making her sick." "You?" Collins laughed, not unkindly, but dismissively. "The helps boy? Playing detective? Son, we have the best doctors money can buy. I think they know better than you. But they're not paying attention to the right things. Enough." Collins's voice hardened. "Your mother is one of our best workers. Don't make me reconsider her position here. Do you understand?" Malik understood. He understood that nobody wanted to listen. That nobody wanted to believe a poor black kid from the neighborhood could see what all their expensive doctors had missed. But he also understood something else. If he gave up now, Sophia might not survive whatever was happening to her. The breaking point came during one of Richard Hale's biggest PR events. The mansion was filled with cameras and reporters, all documenting the billionaire's perfect life and his generous charity work. They filmed in the gardens, the ballrooms, even the kitchens. Sophia was kept upstairs, hidden away from the cameras because she was too unpredictable. But Malik watched from the garden as the filming happened. He saw the crew setting up in the dining room, right where Sophia would have her lunch. And then he saw it. The chef spraying down the counters with that red bottled cleaner. The same cleaner Sophia had drawn over and over. The same cleaner that had been introduced just weeks before her episode started getting worse. Malik's heart hammered. He had to warn someone. He had to... A scream cut through the air. Everyone stopped. The cameras kept rolling as people rushed toward the sound. Malik ran with them, pushing through the crowd until he reached the upstairs hallway. Sophia lay on the floor, convulsing. But this time was different. This time, foam gathered at the corners of her mouth. Her eyes rolled back. Her body shook violently. "Call an ambulance," someone shouted. Richard Hale stood frozen, his face pale, cameras still rolling behind him. "Keep filming," he said numbly, as if on autopilot. "The viewers need to see." "Stop filming and help her." Malik pushed past the paralyzed adults. "Someone call Dr. Sharma, now." "Who authorized this child to be here?" Mr. Collins demanded. "I don't care," Malik screamed. "Call Dr. Sharma or she's going to die." The desperation in his voice must have broken through, because someone finally pulled out a phone. Malik knelt beside Sophia, remembering something he'd read about keeping her safe during a seizure. He cleared the space around her, made sure she wasn't hitting anything, turned her gently on her side. "It's okay," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "Help is coming. I promise. Help is coming." Dr. Sharma arrived within minutes. She'd been at a nearby clinic. She rushed in with a medical bag, immediately assessing Sophia with practiced efficiency. She pulled out medication, administered it carefully, monitored Sophia's breathing. Slowly, the convulsions subsided. Sophia's eyes fluttered, her breathing steadied. Dr. Sharma looked up at Malik, her expression grave. You may have just saved her life by calling me when you did. Richard Hale finally moved, dropping to his knees beside his daughter. His hands shook as he touched her face. What's wrong with her? What's happening? I need to run tests, Dr. Sharma said firmly. Real tests, Mr. Hale, not the ones your board wants me to run. The ones I should have run months ago. Do whatever it takes, Richard whispered, his voice breaking. Just save her. Please. As the ambulance arrived and they prepared to transport Sophia, Richard turned to the cameras. Get out, all of you. Get out of my house. That night, after everyone had gone, Malik sat in his apartment, staring at his tablet. His mother held him close, stroking his hair. You did good, baby, she whispered. You did so good. But Malik couldn't shake the image of Sophia lying on that floor, foam at her lips, her body fighting something invisible. He'd seen what everyone else had missed. He'd tried to warn them. The question now was whether he'd figured it out in time. At the hospital, as machines beeped and doctors whispered, Richard Hale stood over his daughter's bed. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to cry. And in his mind, he could hear the voice of a 10-year-old boy screaming the words nobody else had dared to say. Someone help her. Maybe, just maybe, someone finally would. The hospital lights hummed softly as Malik sat in the waiting room, his mother beside him, both of them exhausted. Hours had passed since the ambulance had taken Sophia away, since the chaos at the mansion had finally quieted. Richard Hale had disappeared behind closed doors with doctors, leaving Malik and Mrs. Carter in limbo, wondering if they'd be blamed or thanked for what happened. Dr. Sharma emerged from the emergency wing, her expression serious but not defeated. She walked straight to Malik and knelt in front of him. She's stable, Dr. Sharma said softly. You did the right thing calling for me. Is she going to be okay? Malik's voice was small, frightened. I hope so. But I need to understand what's been happening to her. Can you show me everything you've collected? Malik nodded and pulled out his tablet with trembling hands. Dr. Sharma studied his notes in silence, her eyes moving rapidly across the screen. The dates, the times, the patterns, everything Malik had observed over weeks of watching and worrying. But Malik knew documentation alone wouldn't be enough. He needed proof. Real proof that could make the doctors take action. The next morning, Malik woke with new determination. His mother had the day off, which meant he had time. He convinced her to take him back to the mansion, claiming he'd left his library book in the garden. She was reluctant, worried about Mr. Collins's warnings, but Malik's pleading eyes won her over. Once at the estate, Malik slipped away while his mother spoke with another housekeeper. He made his way to the kitchen, his heart pounding so hard he thought everyone could hear it. The morning staff was busy preparing lunch for the remaining household. Nobody noticed a small boy ducking behind the pantry door. He watched and waited. The chef pulled out containers from the refrigerator. Sophia's special meals, prepared according to strict dietary guidelines. But then came the part that made Malik's skin crawl. The chef sprayed down the preparation counter with the red-bottled cleaner, wiping it quickly before setting Sophia's food directly on the same surface. Malik's hands shook as he pulled out his mother's old phone. He snapped photos as quietly as possible. The bottle's label, the chef's preparation method, the way the chemical residue seemed to leave a faint film on the counter before being wiped away. When the chef stepped out to grab something from storage, Malik moved quickly. He grabbed one of Sophia's prepared snack bars from the container and stuffed it in his pocket. His heart hammered as he slipped back out of the kitchen, racing through the servants' corridor and out to the garden where his mother waited. Got it, he announced, holding up a random book he'd grabbed from the garden bench to sell the story. Mrs. Carter eyed him suspiciously. That was quick. I remembered where I left it, Malik said, trying to sound casual. On the way home, guilt gnawed at him. He'd just stolen something, even if it was for a good reason. But when he thought about Sophia lying in that hospital bed, foam at her lips, body convulsing, the guilt faded. He had to know what was making her sick. That afternoon, Malik took the bus across town to the neighborhood pharmacy where his late father used to get prescriptions. He'd been there dozens of times as a kid, and he remembered Mr. Patterson, the lab assistant who always gave him lollipops and asked about school. The bell chimed as Malik entered. Mr. Patterson looked up from behind the counter, his weathered face breaking into a surprised smile. "Malik Carter? Boy, you've grown. How's your mama doing?" "She's good, Mr. Patterson, working hard." Malik approached the counter nervously. "I need help with something. It's important." "What kind of help?" Malik pulled out the snack bar, wrapped in a napkin. "I need to know what's in this, like really in it. My friend keeps getting sick after eating stuff like this, and I think there's something wrong with it." Mr. Patterson's eyebrows rose. "Your friend?" "Malik. This sounds like something for doctors." "The doctors aren't listening. Please, Mr. Patterson. You knew my dad. He always said you were the smartest person he knew." The old man's expression softened at the mention of Malik's father. He sighed and took the snack bar, examining it carefully. "I can't do a full analysis here, but I can check the ingredients against common allergens and irritants. Give me a few minutes." Malik waited, pacing the small pharmacy, while Mr. Patterson worked in the back. Every minute felt like an hour. Finally, the lab assistant returned, his face troubled. "Malik, this product contains a preservative called sodium benzoate. It's common in packaged foods and generally safe for most people. But," he paused, pulling out a reference book, "in some individuals, especially children with certain genetic conditions, it can cause severe reactions. Seizures, tremors, neurological symptoms. Could it hurt someone with autism? It's not the autism itself, but some autistic individuals have co-occurring metabolic disorders that make them unable to process certain chemicals properly. If this girl has been eating these regularly and her body can't break down the preservative..." Mr. Patterson's voice trailed off. "The implication's clear. She could be getting poisoned." Malik finished, his voice barely a whisper. "Slowly, yes. Her body would be accumulating toxins it couldn't eliminate." Malik felt his knees go weak. He'd been right. All along he'd been right. But knowing and proving were different things. And getting adults to listen was the hardest part of all. He thanked Mr. Patterson and ran most of the way home, clutching the snack bar and the notes the lab assistant had written for him. When he burst through the apartment door, his mother nearly dropped the dish she was washing. "Malik, what's wrong?" "I know what's making Sophia sick. I know what it is." He explained everything. The cleaner, the food, Mr. Patterson's findings. Mrs. Carter listened with growing alarm, then pulled her son into a tight hug. "You can't go back to that house with this information," she said firmly. "If you accuse them of poisoning that girl, even accidentally, they'll destroy us. They'll sue us, fire me, maybe worse. Mom, we have to tell someone. Then we tell Dr. Sharma. Let her handle it. Promise me, Malik. Promise me you won't go back there." Malik promised, though the words felt like ash in his mouth. But fate had other plans. That evening, Richard Hale was hosting an important investor dinner at the mansion. It was supposed to restore confidence after the PR disaster of Sophia's collapse on camera. The house gleamed with preparation, every surface polished, every flower arranged perfectly. Image was everything, and the image needed to be one of control and success. Upstairs, Sophia had been brought home from the hospital against Dr. Sharma's recommendations. Richard insisted she'd recover better in familiar surroundings, though everyone knew the real reason. Having her in the hospital made him look like a father who couldn't manage his own household. Malik knew none of this. He was at home, trying to call Dr. Sharma's office, but getting only a voicemail. He left 3 messages, each more desperate than the last. "Dr. Sharma, it's Malik. I found something. The food, it's poisoning her. Please call me back, please." Around 8 that evening, Mrs. Carter received an urgent call. One of the housekeepers had fallen ill, and they needed her to cover the dinner service. She tried to refuse, but they offered double pay, and rent was due. She couldn't say no. "You're staying here," she told Malik firmly, pointing at their apartment. "I mean it. Don't leave this room." "Yes, ma'am," Malik agreed. But as the minutes ticked by and Dr. Sharma still hadn't called back, Malik's anxiety grew. What if they gave Sophia dinner? What if she had another seizure, but this time nobody could stop it? What if she died because he'd promised to stay home? He grabbed his backpack, stuffed his evidence inside, and slipped out of the apartment. The mansion blazed with light when Malik arrived. Expensive cars lined the driveway. Through the windows, he could see elegantly dressed people holding wine glasses, laughing and talking as servers moved between them with trays of food. It looked like a scene from a movie, beautiful and untouchable. Malik made his way around to the servants' entrance. The door was propped open for servers rushing in and out. He slipped inside during one of their trips, pressing himself against the wall of the corridor. He could hear his mother's voice in the kitchen, coordinating with other staff. He couldn't risk her seeing him and being distracted. Instead, he moved toward the stairs that led to the family quarters. That's when he heard it, a crash from above. Then screaming, Malik ran up the stairs, his backpack bouncing against his spine. Other servants and guests were already rushing toward the sound. He pushed through them, driven by a terrible certainty. Sophia's room. The door stood open. Inside, she lay on the floor, convulsing violently. A nurse knelt beside her, frantically calling for help. But this seizure was worse than before. Sophia's back arched, her eyes rolled back, and her lips were turning blue. "Where's Dr. Sharma?" Malik shouted, bursting into the room. "She's been trying to reach Mr. Hale all evening," the nurse cried. "He won't take her calls during the dinner." Malik didn't hesitate. He ran back downstairs, shoving past startled guests, and burst into the dining room, where Richard Hale sat at the head of a long table surrounded by men in expensive suits. "Your daughter is dying," Malik screamed. The room went silent. Every face turned toward him. Richard's expression shifted from shock to fury. "How dare you? She's having another seizure, and it's worse. And if you don't get Dr. Sharma here right now, she's going to die." Malik's voice cracked, tears streaming down his face. "Please, I know what's wrong with her. I know what's making her sick. But you have to listen to me. Mr. Collins, remove this child immediately," Richard said coldly. "No." Malik pulled his backpack off and dumped its contents on the pristine white tablecloth. The snack bar, the photos, Mr. Patterson's notes, his tablet with all his observations. "Look at this. All of this. She's being poisoned by the preservatives in her food. Her body can't process them, and they're building up and killing her." "That's absurd," one of the investors scoffed, the boys clearly disturbed. But Mr. Collins picked up one of the photos, the one showing the red bottled cleaner on the counter where food was prepared. His face went pale. "Sir," the butler said quietly, "perhaps we should at least—" A blood-curdling scream came from upstairs. Everyone froze. Malik didn't wait for permission. He grabbed his evidence and ran back to Sophia's room. She was worse, her body rigid, her breathing shallow and labored. The nurse was crying, unable to help. "Call Dr. Sharma," Malik ordered, pulling out his own phone and dialing 911. "I need an ambulance at the Hale estate right now. 8-year-old girl, severe seizure, possible toxic reaction to sodium benzoate." As he gave the operator information, his eyes fell on the nurse's medical bag. He remembered something he'd read during his research. "Do you have activated charcoal?" he asked the nurse. "What? I can't just—" "Do you have it?" She nodded, confused. "Give it to her. It absorbs toxins, please." The nurse looked at Malik like he was insane, but something in his desperate certainty made her act. She prepared a small dose of activated charcoal solution and carefully administered it, supporting Sophia's head. "Come on," Malik whispered, kneeling beside Sophia and taking her hand. "Come on, Sophia. Fight it. Please fight it." Behind him, Richard Hale appeared in the doorway, his face ashen. For the first time, he looked truly terrified. The paramedics arrived within minutes, but to Malik it felt like hours. They took over, working with practiced efficiency, asking questions the nurse couldn't fully answer. But Malik could. He told them everything. The timeline, the symptoms, his theory about the preservative poisoning. One of the paramedics, a woman with sharp eyes and a kind face, listened to him seriously. "You documented all this?" "Yes, ma'am. I've been watching her for weeks." "Smart kid." She turned to her partner. "Get IV fluids started. We're treating this as a potential toxic exposure." They loaded Sophia onto a stretcher. As they carried her out, Malik followed, refusing to be left behind. His mother appeared in the hallway, her face a mask of horror. "Malik, what did you—" "I'm sorry, Mom," he said, not stopping, "but I had to help her." At the hospital, Malik sat in the same waiting room as before, but this time Richard Hale sat across from him, head in his hands. The dinner guests had scattered. The perfect evening had shattered. And somewhere behind those emergency room doors, Sophia was fighting for her life. Dr. Sharma arrived in a fury, white coat billowing behind her like wings. "I tried to call you 15 times, Mr. Hale, 15, and you refused every single call because you were too busy entertaining investors." Richard said nothing. What could he say? Dr. Sharma disappeared into the emergency wing. Time crawled by. Malik's mother sat beside him, alternating between worry for Sophia and anger at Malik for breaking his promise. But mostly, she just held him close. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Dr. Sharma emerged. Her expression was exhausted, but not defeated. "She's going to make it," she said quietly. The relief that flooded through Malik was so intense he thought he might pass out. His mother squeezed his hand so hard it hurt. "How?" Richard asked, his voice hoarse. Dr. Sharma looked at Malik. "Because this young man figured out what 3 board-certified physicians missed. Sophia has a rare genetic mutation that prevents her from metabolizing certain chemical preservatives, specifically sodium benzoate. It's been accumulating in her system for months, causing increasingly severe neurological symptoms." "The food," Richard whispered. "The food, the cleaning products used where food was prepared, the sprays used in her room. All of it. She was being slowly poisoned in her own home." Dr. Sharma's voice was cold. "And Malik not only figured it out, he documented it, he tested it, and he acted when no one else would." Every eye in the waiting room turned to Malik. He felt small under the weight of their stares. "Can I see her?" Richard asked. "She's unconscious but stable. You can sit with her." Richard stood, then turned to Malik. For a long moment, he just stared at the 10-year-old boy who'd done what none of his expensive doctors could. Then, without a word, he walked toward the emergency wing. The story broke the next morning. Someone at the dinner had recorded Malik's dramatic entrance on their phone, and by dawn, it was everywhere. "Poor boy saves billionaire's daughter." The video showed Malik dumping his evidence on the table, his voice breaking as he begged Richard to listen. News crews descended on the hospital. Reporters tried to interview Mrs. Carter, offering money for exclusive access to Malik. She refused every offer. "My son didn't do it for money or fame," she told one particularly pushy journalist. He did it because he saw a little girl who needed help, and he actually cared enough to do something. Inside Sophia's hospital room, Malik sat beside her bed. He'd snuck in early before visiting hours, and the nurses had taken pity on him and let him stay. He held one of his wooden puzzles, turning it over in his hands. "You're going to be okay," he whispered to her. "Sleeping form. Dr. Sharma says they've got you on special fluids now that'll clean out all the bad stuff. And they're going to make sure everything you eat from now on is safe. You're going to be okay." Sophia's eyelids fluttered. Slowly, painfully slowly, they opened. Her eyes, usually so distant, focused on Malik with startling clarity. "Malik," she whispered. It was the first time she'd spoken his name clearly without prompting, just because she wanted to. Tears spilled down Malik's cheeks. "Yeah, it's me. I'm here. You saved me." "No," Malik said, squeezing her hand gently. "You saved yourself by trying to tell us. I just finally understood what you were saying." Dr. Sharma entered then, surprised to find Malik there but not displeased. She checked Sophia's vitals, satisfaction evident on her face. "You're going to make a full recovery, Sophia," she said warmly, "but you'll need to be very careful about what you eat and what you're exposed to from now on. We'll work together to figure out exactly what's safe for you. Does that sound okay?" Sophia nodded, her eyes never leaving Malik. Later that day, Richard Hale was allowed to visit. He approached Sophia's bed slowly, like a man walking to his own execution. When he saw she was awake, his face crumbled. "Sophia, His voice broke. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Sophia looked at her father for a long moment, then reached up and touched his face. It was a simple gesture, but it carried the weight of forgiveness that Richard didn't deserve and hadn't earned. "I almost lost you," Richard whispered, taking her small hand in both of his. "I was so focused on my business, on my reputation, on looking successful, that I couldn't see what was right in front of me. My little girl was suffering, and I did nothing. You're here now," Sophia said softly, each word an effort but clear. Richard looked over at Malik, who'd been trying to make himself invisible in the corner. "You, come here." Malik approached nervously. Richard stood and, to everyone's surprise, knelt down to Malik's eye level. "I owe you an apology, son," Richard said, his voice thick with emotion. "And more than that, I owe you a debt I can never repay. You saw what I was too blind and too proud to see. You did what I should have done. You protected my daughter when I failed her." "I just wanted her to be okay," Malik said simply. "Your mother," Richard continued, standing. "She's one of the finest people I've never bothered to truly know. I want to promote her to household manager with a salary that reflects her value, and I want to set up a college fund for you. Mr. Hale, you don't have to." "Yes, I do. Because you taught me something today, Malik. You taught me that real wealth isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in how we care for the people who depend on us. And by that measure, I've been the poorest man alive." Mrs. Carter entered the room then, having been called by a nurse. She looked between her son, the billionaire, and the little girl in the hospital bed, trying to understand what she'd walked into. "Mrs. Carter," Richard said, "I owe you an apology as well. I've taken your work for granted, and I've dismissed your son when I should have listened. I hope you'll give me a chance to make that right." Mrs. Carter looked at Malik, who nodded slightly. "Mr. Hale, I appreciate that. But the only thing I need is for my son to be allowed to visit Sophia as her friend if she wants him to. Everything else is just details." Richard smiled for the first time in days. "I think Sophia would very much like that." Over the following days, as Sophia continued to recover, Malik visited every afternoon. He brought his puzzles, his drawings, and stories about school. Sophia began talking more, her vocabulary expanding as the toxins cleared from her system. The Pediatric Research Foundation, where Dr. Sharma worked, took notice of Malik's observations and methodology. They invited him to present his findings, suggesting that his case study could help other children with similar undiagnosed conditions. A representative from a prestigious science academy arrived at the hospital, offering Malik a scholarship opportunity. "You have an extraordinary mind," the representative told him. "The way you observed, documented, and tested your hypothesis, that's what we try to teach students years older than you. You did it naturally." Malik felt overwhelmed by the attention, but Dr. Sharma helped him understand its importance. "You didn't just save Sophia," she explained. "You've shown the medical community that we need to listen to all voices, especially the ones we usually ignore. There are probably other children suffering from similar exposures, and now we know what to look for." One evening, as visiting hours were ending, Sophia gave Malik a new drawing. This one showed two children holding hands under a bright sun. At the top, in careful letters, she'd written, "Friends forever." "I like this one," Malik said, his voice thick with emotion. "You're my best friend," Sophia said clearly. "You listened when nobody else would." "You're my best friend, too," Malik replied. And he meant it. Richard stood in the doorway, watching the exchange. For the first time since he'd built his empire, he felt like he was witnessing something truly valuable. Not a merger, not a stock price increase, not another zero added to his net worth. He was watching his daughter smile, and he was watching a 10-year-old boy from a one-room apartment teach him what it meant to truly see another human being. That night, as Malik and his mother walked to the bus stop, Mrs. Carter wrapped her arm around her son's shoulders. "I'm so proud of you, baby," she said. "So incredibly proud." "I was scared the whole time," Malik admitted. "Scared nobody would listen, scared I was wrong, scared she would die before I could help her. But you did it anyway. That's what courage is. Being scared but doing the right thing anyway." They rode the bus home in comfortable silence. When they reached their apartment building, Malik looked up at the small window that marked their home. It was still small, still just one room. But somehow, it felt bigger than it had that morning. Because he'd learned something Richard Hale's billions couldn't buy. That one person who truly sees, truly cares, and truly acts can change everything. And Sophia Hale, recovering in her hospital bed with Malik's drawing clutched in her hands, knew that some heroes don't wear capes. Some heroes wear hand-me-down clothes and carry worn backpacks and see the world with eyes that refuse to look away from suffering. Some heroes are 10 years old and brave enough to make noise in a world that demands their silence. And those heroes, she thought as sleep finally claimed her, are the ones worth remembering. Within 48 hours, Malik's face was everywhere. The video of him bursting into Richard Hale's investor dinner had been shared millions of times across social media. News networks played it on loop, adding dramatic music and slow-motion effects. Headlines screamed variations of the same story. "Poor boy saves billionaire's daughter." 10-year-old solves medical mystery doctors missed. The hero nobody expected. Malik didn't understand the magnitude of what was happening until he tried to go to school. Camera crews had camped outside his apartment building overnight, their vans blocking the narrow street. Reporters shouted questions as he and his mother emerged, microphones thrust toward them like weapons. "Malik, how does it feel to be a hero? Did you always know what was wrong with Sophia? Mrs. Carter, will you accept payment for your story?" Mrs. Carter pulled Malik close, shielding him with her body as they pushed through the crowd. "No comment. Please let us through. My son needs to get to school. We're offering $50,000 for an exclusive interview," one reporter called out. Mrs. Carter stopped, turning to face the man. My son didn't do what he did for money. He did it because he saw a child who needed help, and he actually cared enough to do something. That's not for sale. She pulled Malik away, leaving the reporters to shout after them. On the bus, other passengers stared and whispered, some taking pictures. Malik slumped in his seat, wishing he could disappear. "Is it always going to be like this?" he asked his mother quietly. "I don't know, baby, but we'll get through it together." At the hospital, Sophia's recovery continued. The special diet Dr. Sharma had designed was working. Foods carefully selected to avoid anything her body couldn't metabolize. Each day brought improvements. Her color returned, her energy increased, and most remarkably, her speech continued to develop. Malik visited that afternoon, sneaking in through a service entrance to avoid the cameras that now surrounded the hospital's main entrance. When he reached Sophia's room, he found her sitting up in bed, working on a puzzle with her speech therapist. "Malik!" Sophia's face lit up when she saw him. The therapist smiled and quietly excused herself, giving them privacy. "Hey," Malik said, settling into the chair beside her bed. "How are you feeling?" "Better, much better." Each word came slowly but clearly. "The food doesn't hurt anymore." "That's great, Sophia. That's really great." She reached for her sketch pad and showed him a new drawing. This one depicted the hospital room with stick figures, her, Malik, Dr. Sharma, and now her father, all holding hands in a circle. "You're getting really good at drawing people," Malik said. "I'm drawing what I feel," Sophia explained. "Before, I could only feel scared and hurt. Now I feel safe, because of you." The words hit Malik harder than he expected. He blinked back tears, not wanting to cry in front of her. "I'm just glad you're okay." Over the next few days, the media circus intensified. Television producers called Mrs. Carter's phone constantly. A documentary crew wanted to follow Malik for a month. A children's book publisher wanted to write his story. It was overwhelming and exhausting, but not everyone was pleased with the attention. At the hospital, Dr. Sharma pulled Mrs. Carter aside one evening with troubling news. "I need to tell you something," Dr. Sharma said. "The hospital board has been receiving pressure. Richard's PR advisors are suggesting that the connection between Malik and Sophia should be downplayed." "What? Why?" "Image management. They're worried that the story makes Richard look bad, which it does. And they think associating with the boy from the slums, as they put it, damages the Hale brand." Mrs. Carter's jaw tightened. "After everything Malik did? I know, it's disgusting. I'm telling you because I overheard Richard's team talking. They want him to distance himself from Malik publicly, while quietly paying you off to keep quiet about the whole thing. And what does Richard want?" Dr. Sharma shook her head. "I don't know. He seems conflicted. Part of him understands what Malik did, but his business instincts are pulling him the other way." That evening, Malik overheard his mother on the phone, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. When she hung up, she sat down heavily on their couch. "What's wrong, Mom?" She looked at him with sad eyes. "Nothing for you to worry about, baby. Just grown-up stuff." But Malik did worry. The next day, when he went to visit Sophia, he noticed something different. The friendly nurses seemed awkward around him. Security took longer checking his visitor pass. And when he reached Sophia's room, Mr. Collins was there, speaking with her in low tones. "Ah, young Mr. Carter," Collins said with forced pleasantness. "I was just explaining to Miss Sophia that her schedule will be quite busy with physical therapy and tutoring. Perhaps visits should be limited to family for now. But Malik is my friend." Sophia protested, her voice small but firm. "Of course he is. But you need your rest and—" "It's okay," Malik interrupted, backing toward the door. "I understand. You need to focus on getting better, Sophia. I'll come back another time." He left quickly, not wanting her to see the hurt on his face. In the hallway, he bumped into Dr. Sharma, who took one look at him and understood immediately. "They told you to stay away?" Malik nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. "This is wrong," Dr. Sharma said firmly. "Come with me." She led him to a quiet consultation room and made a phone call. 20 minutes later, she hung up and smiled at Malik. "There's a science fair next month at the community center. The hospital is sponsoring several entries, and I just registered you. You're going to present a project called Pattern of the Heart, documenting Sophia's case and how observation and empathy can lead to medical breakthroughs. But I don't know how to do a science fair project." "Yes, you do. You already did it. You observed, you documented, you formed a hypothesis, you tested it. That's the scientific method, Malik. Now you just need to present it properly." The project gave Malik something to focus on besides the rejection he felt. Over the next 3 weeks, he worked every evening after school, creating charts and graphs from his notes, writing up his observations, preparing a presentation board. Dr. Sharma helped him understand the medical terminology, teaching him how to explain complex concepts in simple terms. Mrs. Carter watched her son work with a mixture of pride and heartbreak. She knew he was pouring his hurt into productivity, avoiding the fact that he missed Sophia and felt betrayed by the Hales' retreat. The night before the science fair, Malik couldn't sleep. He kept rehearsing his presentation in his head, terrified he'd forget everything. When morning finally came, Mrs. Carter helped him load his presentation board onto the bus, riding with him to the community center. The fair was smaller than Malik expected, but well attended. Kids from schools across the district had set up projects ranging from volcano models to robotics demonstrations. Malik's booth was near the back, his hand-drawn charts looking humble compared to some of the computer-printed displays around him. He was adjusting his board when a familiar voice made him freeze. "Excuse me, is this the Pattern of the Heart presentation?" Malik turned to find Richard Hale standing behind him, holding Sophia's hand. She was out of the hospital, dressed in comfortable clothes, wearing her pink headphones around her neck like a necklace. When she saw Malik, her face broke into the biggest smile he'd ever seen. "Malik!" She rushed forward and hugged him tight. "Sophia, you're here. You're really here." "I made Daddy bring me," she said proudly. "When I heard you were presenting today, I said I wouldn't talk anymore if he didn't let me come." Richard looked uncomfortable, but not angry. She was quite insistent, and after everything, he trailed off, not finishing the thought. The fair began, and judges moved from booth to booth. When they reached Malik's presentation, he took a deep breath and began. He explained how he'd noticed Sophia's episodes, how he'd documented the patterns, how he'd connected the dots between her symptoms and her environment. He talked about sodium benzoate and genetic mutations, using the simple language Dr. Sharma had taught him. "The most important part," Malik concluded, "wasn't the science. It was caring enough to pay attention. My project shows that medical breakthroughs don't always come from laboratories. Sometimes they come from just watching, listening, and refusing to accept that someone's suffering is normal." The audience that had gathered around his booth was silent for a moment. Then someone started clapping. Others joined in. Soon the entire section of the fair was applauding. Sophia clapped the hardest, bouncing on her toes with excitement. One of the judges, an older woman with kind eyes, leaned forward. "Young man, this is the most impressive work I've seen at this level. You didn't just do science, you saved a life. That's what science should be for." Malik won first place. When they announced his name, Sophia cheered so loudly that people laughed. Richard stood in the back, watching his daughter's pure joy, and something inside him finally broke open completely. That night, Richard sat alone in Sophia's hospital room. She'd been discharged, but they'd kept the room for final consultations. The walls were still covered with her drawings, each one documenting her journey from isolation and pain to healing and friendship. One drawing in particular caught his attention. It showed a man in a suit standing far away from a small girl. Between them was a dark space, empty and wide. The girl was reaching toward the man, but her hand couldn't bridge the gap. Richard's throat tightened. He recognized himself in that distant figure. All the times he'd been too busy for a bedtime story, too focused on a merger to attend a therapy session, too worried about appearances to simply hold his daughter. He thought about Malik's presentation, the simple truth at its core. Caring enough to pay attention. When had Richard stopped paying attention to what mattered? The door opened and Sophia entered, surprised to find her father there. "Daddy? Why are you here?" "I wanted to look at your drawings," Richard said softly. "I've never really looked at them before, not really." Sophia approached cautiously, as if afraid he might disappear. "Do you like them? They're beautiful, and sad, and honest." He pointed to the drawing of the man and the girl. "That's me, isn't it? Standing far away?" Sophia nodded slowly. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm so sorry." Richard's voice broke. "I almost lost you because I couldn't see what Malik did. A 10-year-old boy from a one-room apartment saw what I couldn't, that my daughter was dying right in front of me." "You're here now," Sophia said, echoing her earlier words to him. She climbed onto his lap, something she hadn't done in years. "That's what matters." Richard held her close, tears streaming down his face. "I don't deserve your forgiveness. I built towers and made billions, but I never built what mattered most, a connection to you. Malik says connections are made of small moments," Sophia offered, "like puzzles, one piece at a time. He's a smart kid, smarter than me." Richard wiped his eyes. "What should we do, Sophia? How do I fix this?" "Listen to people," Sophia said simply. "Like you listened to me just now. Like Malik listened when nobody else would." Over the following weeks, Richard began changing. He started visiting families of children with autism, learning their stories, understanding their struggles. Dr. Sharma introduced him to parents who couldn't afford proper diagnosis, let alone treatment. Their stories shook him deeply. One evening, he brought Malik to his office, not as a spectacle, but as a consultant. "I want to start a foundation," Richard explained, "dedicated to helping children with rare disorders and sensory sensitivities, children who fall through the cracks because their conditions are hard to diagnose or because their families can't afford the specialists they need." "That sounds good," Malik said carefully. "I want to call it the Hale Carter Foundation." Richard watched Malik's reaction. "Your name will be on the plaque, on the letterhead, on everything, because you taught me what real wealth means. Mr. Hale, I don't need my name on anything, but I need it there. I need people to remember that the most important discovery came from someone the world told me to ignore. I need to remember that every single day." Malik looked at this powerful man who was finally learning to be humble. "Okay, but only if the foundation really helps people, not just for show." "Not for show," Richard promised. "For real change." The foundation's launch was scheduled for 2 months later. In the meantime, Sophia's therapy continued, and her progress was remarkable. Her vocabulary expanded daily. She began speaking in full sentences, then paragraphs. Her therapist called it unprecedented. "It's not unprecedented," Dr. Sharma corrected. "She always had words inside her. She just needed the pain to stop so she could find them." One afternoon, Richard brought Sophia to the foundation's future headquarters, a renovated building in downtown. Malik was there with his mother, helping to plan the layout of the diagnostic center. When Sophia entered, she gasped. The walls were covered with art, drawings from children with autism, celebrating their unique way of seeing the world. In the center was a blown-up version of Sophia's drawing, the one showing Malik holding her hand. "This is the heart of everything we're doing," Richard explained. "Your friendship, your courage, Your refusal to give up on each other. That's what we want this place to represent." Sophia walked up to the drawing, touching it gently. Then she turned to Malik and took his hand, just like in the picture. "Thank you," she said clearly, "for seeing me when I was invisible." Malik squeezed her hand. "You were never invisible to me." The Foundation's launch day arrived with clear skies and warm sunshine. Media was there, but Richard had insisted on keeping the focus appropriate. This wasn't about publicity. It was about purpose. Families who would benefit from the Foundation's services were honored guests, their children playing in a special sensory-friendly area designed with Sophia's input. When it was time for speeches, Richard stepped to the microphone. He spoke about failure, about blindness, about the wake-up call that had changed everything. Then he invited Sophia to speak. She approached the microphone nervously, Malik standing just off stage for support. Her voice was quiet at first, but it grew stronger with each word. "Sometimes people like me can't speak," she began. "But someone still hears us." Malik did. He heard me when I couldn't use words. He understood my drawings. He noticed what hurt me. He cared when everyone else was too busy. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. "This foundation is for all the kids who need someone to hear them," Sophia continued. "And I hope everyone remembers that heroes don't always look how you expect. Sometimes they're 10 years old. Sometimes they live in small apartments. Sometimes they're the people you walk past without seeing." The applause that followed was thunderous. Sophia looked back at Malik, who gave her a proud thumbs up. She'd done it. She'd found her voice, and she was using it to make sure other children would be heard too. After the ceremony, as families explored the new facility, Richard found Malik standing alone, looking at a display showing the timeline of Sophia's diagnosis and recovery. "You know what I realized?" Richard said quietly, joining him. "I spent my whole life measuring success in things I could count: dollars, properties, stock prices. But the most valuable thing I ever had was something I couldn't put a number on." "Sophia," Malik said. "Yes, and I nearly lost her because I was counting the wrong things." Richard turned to face Malik directly. "You gave her back to me. More than that, you taught me how to actually be her father. How do I ever thank you for that?" "Keep helping other kids," Malik replied simply. "That's the only thanks I need." Richard nodded, and for the first time since they'd met, he offered Malik his hand. Not as a billionaire to a charity case, but as one human being to another, equal in the ways that mattered. They shook hands as equals, surrounded by the noise of children playing, families laughing, and hope being rebuilt piece by careful piece. Outside, the sun set over the city, casting long shadows that gradually merged into evening. Inside the Hale Carter Foundation, lights blazed bright, a beacon for families who'd been searching in darkness for too long. And somewhere in the building, Sophia sat with a group of children, showing them her drawings and teaching them that silence could speak volumes if someone cared enough to listen. The world had taken notice of a poor boy who'd saved a billionaire's daughter. But the real story, the one that mattered, was simpler and more profound. It was about human beings finally learning to see each other. The success of the Hale Carter Foundation brought unexpected complications. Within weeks of the launch, Malik's story had spread even further, reaching people who saw opportunity where others saw inspiration. Private school admissions officers called daily, offering full scholarships. Wealthy families from across the state contacted Mrs. Carter with proposals that made her uncomfortable. One Saturday morning, a couple arrived at their apartment in a luxury car. The woman wore pearls that probably cost more than a year's rent. The man carried a leather briefcase that screamed money. "Mrs. Carter," the woman began with a practiced smile, "we've followed Malik's story with such admiration. We'd like to offer him something extraordinary. A chance to live with us, attend the finest schools, have every advantage. You want to adopt my son? Mrs. Carter's voice was dangerously calm. Not legally, of course, more like sponsorship. He'd spend weekends with us, summers at our estate in the Hamptons. Think of the opportunities. I think you should leave, Mrs. Carter said, opening the door wider. But surely you want what's best for... What's best for my son is growing up knowing he's loved for who he is, not what he did. Now please go. After they left, Malik emerged from behind the curtain where he'd been listening. Mom, maybe we should have... No. She pulled him into a hug. You're not a project, baby. You're not a publicity stunt. You're my son, and nobody's taking you from me, no matter how much money they wave around. That conversation repeated itself in different forms over the following weeks. Each offer was more extravagant than the last. Each one made Malik feel less like a person and more like a trophy to be displayed. At school, things weren't easier. The kids who'd been his friends before now treated him differently. Some were jealous of the attention. Others mocked him, calling him charity case and teacher's pet. During lunch one day, 3 older boys cornered him by the lockers. Think you're special now, Carter? One sneered. Saving some rich girl doesn't make you better than us. I never said I was better than anyone. Malik replied quietly, trying to edge past them. Your face is everywhere, like you're some kind of superhero. But you're just the janitor's kid who got lucky. The words stung more than Malik wanted to admit. He went home that day and told his mother he didn't want to be famous anymore. He just wanted things to go back to normal. I know it's hard, baby, Mrs. Carter said, stroking his hair. But you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. What you did matters. It changed lives. You just have to remember why you did it. Not for the attention, but because it was right. Meanwhile, Richard Hale faced his own challenges. His investors were growing impatient with the foundation, viewing it as a distraction from profit. During a tense board meeting, the criticism came to a head. Richard, we understand you had a scare with your daughter, one investor said, his tone barely concealing his frustration. But this foundation is affecting your focus. Stock prices are down. Projects are delayed. The company needs your full attention. My daughter nearly died because I gave the company my full attention, Richard replied evenly. I'm not making that mistake again. Then perhaps it's time to consider whether you're the right person to lead this company forward. The threat was clear. Richard looked around the boardroom at faces that had once shown him nothing but deference. Now they looked at him like a liability. Do what you have to do, Richard said, standing. But I won't apologize for finally getting my priorities straight. He walked out, leaving a room full of stunned executives behind. For the first time in his career, Richard Hale had chosen something more important than business. It felt terrifying and liberating at the same time. That evening, Richard invited Malik to the mansion for dinner. A real dinner, not a formal event. Just Richard, Sophia, Malik, and Mrs. Carter, eating in the garden under string lights. Sophia had prepared something special. She'd been working with her art therapist on a project, and now she proudly unveiled it. A small garden plot she'd designed herself, with flowers arranged in patterns that meant something to her. This purple section is for calm, she explained, her words flowing more naturally than ever. The yellow is for happy, and the red ones in the middle, those are for brave, like Malik. It's beautiful, Sophia, Malik said, genuinely impressed. I want to show you something else. She led him to a small wooden structure near the garden's edge, a project shed Richard had helped her set up. Inside were tools, wood, and half-finished crafts. I'm learning to make puzzles, like yours. Want to build one together? They spent the next hour working side by side, cutting and sanding wood, laughing when pieces didn't fit quite right. Richard and Mrs. Carter watched from the patio, both thinking the same thing. This was what childhood should look like. He's a good influence on her, Richard said quietly. She's more herself around him than anyone else. They're good influences on each other, Mrs. Carter replied. Malik's been struggling lately with all the attention. Sophia reminds him why it matters. Their peaceful evening was interrupted by an alarm. Smoke detectors shrieked from inside the mansion. Richard jumped up, his face going pale. "Fire!" someone shouted from inside. Chaos erupted. Staff members ran from the building. Someone yelled about an electrical fire in the east wing, the section being renovated, where old wiring had finally failed. The wing closest to Sophia's bedroom. "Sophia's medication," Richard shouted. "It's in her room, she needs it." "The fire department is on the way," Mr. Collins called out, phone pressed to his ear. "They'll be here in minutes." But Malik was already running. He knew the mansion's layout from months of waiting for his mother. He knew the servants' corridors, the back stairs, the route to Sophia's room that avoided the main halls where the fire was spreading. "Malik, no!" Mrs. Carter screamed, but he was gone. Inside, smoke filled the corridors, burning Malik's eyes and throat. He pulled his shirt over his nose and mouth, staying low like he'd learned in school fire drills. The heat intensified as he climbed the back stairs, but he pushed forward. Sophia's room was thick with smoke, but not yet burning. Malik grabbed her medication bag from the nightstand, then spotted something else. Her sketch pad, the one with all her drawings documenting their friendship. He couldn't leave it to burn. As he turned to leave, part of the ceiling gave way, showering sparks and burning debris. A wooden beam crashed down, blocking his exit. Malik coughed violently, his lungs screaming for clean air. Through the smoke, he saw another way. The main hallway, the one closest to the fire. He had no choice. Clutching the medication and sketch pad, Malik ran through smoke so thick he could barely see his own hands. The heat was overwhelming. His skin felt like it was blistering. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only move forward on instinct and determination. He burst through the mansion's front doors just as firefighters arrived, collapsing on the lawn. The medication bag slipped from his burned hands. The sketch pad fell open beside him, its pages protected from the flames but singed at the edges. "Malik!" Multiple voices screamed his name. Mrs. Carter reached him first, dropping to her knees beside her unconscious son. "Baby, wake up, please wake up." Paramedics took over, checking his vitals, administering oxygen. Richard stood frozen, Sophia clinging to his leg, both of them staring at the boy who just risked his life for medication and memories. "He went in there for her," Richard whispered, his voice hollow with shock. "Again. He saved her again." At the hospital, Malik drifted in and out of consciousness. He had smoke inhalation, minor burns on his hands and arms, and exhaustion that went bone deep. Doctors said he'd been minutes away from permanent lung damage. Mrs. Carter never left his bedside. She held his hand, praying silently, wondering how her baby boy had become so brave and whether that bravery would be the thing that destroyed him. On the third day, Malik finally woke fully. His throat felt like sandpaper. His skin was tender where the burns were healing. But the first thing he asked was, "Did I get the medication?" His mother burst into tears. "Yes, baby. You got it. You got everything." "Good," Malik rasped, then closed his eyes again. Richard visited later that day, bringing Sophia with him. When Malik saw her, he managed a weak smile. "Hey, Sophia." "You saved my drawings," she said softly, holding up the singed sketch pad. "You could have died, but you saved my drawings." "They're important," Malik replied simply. "They tell your story." Sophia climbed onto the hospital bed carefully, mindful of his injuries, and curled up beside him. "You're my hero," she whispered. "My real hero." Richard stood at the foot of the bed, gripping the railing so hard his knuckles turned white. When he finally spoke, his voice shook with emotion. "Malik, I don't know how to—" "There are no words. You've saved my daughter twice now. You've risked everything, and I—" He stopped, overcome. "Please," Malik said quietly. "Don't make it more than it is. She needed help. I could help. That's all." "No," Richard said firmly. "It's not all. Most people wouldn't have run into that building. Most people would have waited for professionals, would have thought of their own safety first. But not you. You saw someone who needed you, and you didn't hesitate." He pulled out his phone and made a call. "Get the cameras ready. We're doing a press conference tonight." That evening, from the hospital's media room, Richard Hale spoke to a room full of reporters. His usual polished demeanor was gone, replaced by raw honesty. "This afternoon, a 10-year-old boy ran into a burning building to save my daughter's medication and her most precious possessions. That same boy is the reason my daughter is alive today. He saw what I couldn't see, understood what I refused to understand, and acted when everyone else, including me, failed." He paused, collecting himself. "There are people who've suggested I should distance myself from Malik Carter, that associating with a boy from the slums, as they put it, damages my brand. To those people I say this: Malik Carter has more courage, more integrity, and more wisdom in his 10 years than I've managed in 40+. He's not a liability. He's not a project. He's a hero. Our hero." The press conference went viral within hours. The video of Richard's emotional declaration spread across every platform. But more importantly, it reached the kids at Malik's school, the ones who'd mocked him and called him names. When Malik returned to school 2 weeks later, still bandaged and moving carefully, something had changed. The hallways went quiet as he walked through. Then one kid started clapping. Another joined. Soon the entire corridor erupted in applause. Malik felt his face burn, not from fire this time, but from embarrassment and pride mixing together. His teacher wiped tears from her eyes. Even the kids who'd bullied him nodded with grudging respect. Life began to settle into a new rhythm. The media attention finally started to fade, replaced by the next sensational story. Malik could walk down the street without cameras following. His mother could answer the phone without hearing another adoption proposal. The Hale Carter Foundation grew steadily, helping dozens of families navigate diagnoses and treatment for their children. Dr. Sharma expanded her research, using Malik's case study as a foundation for new protocols in identifying environmental triggers for neurological conditions. Months passed. Summer turned to fall, and Malik turned 11. For his birthday, Sophia organized a surprise party at the foundation's headquarters. She'd invited kids from Malik's school, children from the foundation's programs, and even some of the nurses and doctors who'd treated both of them. "Speech! Speech!" someone called out when they brought out the cake. Malik stood reluctantly, unused to being the center of attention in a good way. Thank you everyone for coming. This past year has been weird and scary and amazing. I learned that sometimes the scariest thing is caring about someone enough to take risks for them. But that's also the most important thing." He looked at Sophia, who beamed at him. "My best friend taught me that being different isn't something to fix or hide. It's just part of who you are, and the right people will love you for all of it, not despite parts of it." The applause was genuine, warm. After the party, as Malik helped clean up, Richard approached him with an envelope. "What's this?" "Open it." Inside was information about a national science competition. Malik's project on environmental triggers in neurodivergent children had been nominated for a prestigious award. "The ceremony is in Washington next month," Richard explained. "I'd like to sponsor your trip. You, your mother, Sophia, all of us. We'll make it a proper vacation." "Mr. Hale, you don't have to keep doing things for me. I know I don't have to. I want to. Besides, Sophia would never forgive me if we missed your moment." The trip to Washington was Malik's first time on an airplane, his first time seeing monuments and museums, his first time feeling like the country stretched far beyond his neighborhood. The awards ceremony was held in a grand hotel ballroom with scientists and educators from across the nation. When Malik's name was called, he walked to the stage with Sophia beside him. She'd insisted on being part of his presentation. Together they explained how observation, empathy, and refusing to accept suffering as normal had led to a medical breakthrough. The most important tool in science isn't expensive equipment, Malik concluded. It's caring enough to pay attention and being brave enough to speak up when something's wrong. Those tools are free and everyone has them. He won the award. The standing ovation lasted 3 full minutes. His mother cried. Richard cried. Even Sophia, who'd been practicing staying calm in overwhelming situations, let tears stream down her face. Back home, life continued to transform. Richard quietly used his influence to improve Malik's neighborhood. The local playground, which had been a broken-down eyesore for years, was rebuilt with sensory-friendly equipment. The community center received new computers and after-school programs. None of it bore the Hale name. Richard had learned that real giving didn't need recognition. One Saturday, Richard showed up at the old playground, unannounced, dressed in jeans and a t-shirt instead of his usual suit. He joined the volunteers building the new equipment, hammering and painting alongside neighbors who'd once viewed him as a distant billionaire. Mrs. Carter found him there, sweating and smiling, and barely recognized him. "Mr. Hale, what are you doing?" "Your son reminded me what real wealth means," Richard replied, wiping his forehead. "I figured it was time I invested in the things that actually matter." She smiled and picked up a paintbrush. "Well then, let's get to work." As fall deepened into winter, Sophia reached a milestone nobody had predicted. Her speech had developed so fully that her therapist said she was now at age-appropriate levels. Her anxiety was manageable. She was thriving. To celebrate, she insisted on doing something special for Malik. She spent weeks working on it in secret, with only her father, an art therapist, knowing what she was creating. On Christmas Eve, she presented it to him, a framed drawing, more detailed and beautiful than anything she'd done before. It showed 3 figures standing together under a bright sun, Malik, Sophia, and Richard holding hands. Above them, in careful calligraphy, were 3 words: listen, care, see. "These are the 3 things you taught me," Sophia explained, her voice clear and confident. "Listen to people even when they can't speak. Care about them even when it's hard. See them even when everyone else looks away." Malik stared at the drawing, overwhelmed. "Sophia, this is... I don't know what to say." "Say you'll remember," she replied, "even when we're grown up and things are different. Remember that you saved me by doing these 3 things." "I'll remember," Malik promised. "Always." That night, as Malik and his mother walked home from the Hale mansion, fresh snow beginning to fall, Mrs. Carter pulled her son close. "I'm so proud of you, baby. Not because you're famous or won awards. Because you stayed yourself through all of it. You stayed kind. It's what Dad would have wanted," Malik said quietly. "Yes. Yes, it is." The next year brought continued growth. Malik excelled in school, particularly in science. Sophia started attending a specialized school that understood her needs and celebrated her abilities. The foundation helped over 300 families in its first full year of operation. But the most meaningful change was quieter. Richard Hale, once known only for his business empire, became known for something more important: his humanity. He spoke at conferences about the dangers of prioritizing wealth over well-being. He wrote opinion pieces about listening to voices that society typically ignored. He became an advocate for seeing people rather than profits. One spring afternoon, Malik and Sophia sat in the rebuilt playground, watching younger kids play on equipment they'd helped design. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" Sophia asked. "What do you mean?" "If you hadn't noticed me that day. If you hadn't cared enough to keep watching. If you'd listened when people told you to mind your own business." Malik considered this. "I think about it sometimes, but I also think some things are meant to happen. Not like fate exactly, but I was supposed to see you. We were supposed to be friends." "Best friends," Sophia corrected. "Best friends," Malik agreed. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the sky orange and pink. Somewhere behind them, their parents talked quietly, planning the foundation's next initiative. Around them, the neighborhood that had once been ignored now thrived with new resources and renewed hope. Years later, when people asked Malik about that time in his life, the year he became famous for saving a billionaire's daughter, he always said the same thing. "I didn't save her. We saved each other. She taught me that being different is beautiful, that silence can speak, that the smallest voice can carry the biggest truth. And I taught her, well, I guess I taught her that she was worth hearing." "What about Richard Hale?" they'd ask. "Did you change him?" Malik would smile at that. "He changed himself. I just helped him see what was already there, a father who loved his daughter but forgot how to show it. Sometimes people need permission to be who they really are instead of who they think they should be." The story of Malik Carter and Sophia Hale became more than a viral sensation. It became a reminder that heroism doesn't always look like what we expect, that wisdom doesn't require age or wealth or education. It requires paying attention to the world around us and caring enough to act when we see suffering. The Hale Carter Foundation still operates today, helping thousands of children and families. Its lobby features that famous drawing, Malik, Sophia, and Richard holding hands under a bright sun, with 3 words that guide everything they do: listen, care, see. And sometimes, if you visit on a Saturday afternoon, you might see 2 friends sitting in the sensory garden, building wooden puzzles together and laughing at private jokes. One is the daughter of a billionaire who learned to use her voice. The other is the son of a janitor who taught the world that the least expected among us often see what everyone else misses. They're older now, but the connection between them remains unchanged, forged in crisis, strengthened by courage, and sustained by the simple truth that real friendship transcends every boundary society tries to build. In the end, this is what Malik's story teaches us. Sometimes the ones with the least are the ones who see the most. Sometimes a child from a one-room apartment can save not just one life, but many, not through wealth or power, but through the radical act of paying attention and refusing to look away from suffering. And sometimes, just sometimes, that's enough to change the world. The sun sets over the city, casting long shadows across the foundation's grounds. Inside, lights burn bright, guiding families out of darkness and into hope. Outside, 2 friends walk home together, their laughter floating on the evening breeze. The story isn't just about what Malik did for Sophia, or what Richard learned, or what the foundation accomplished. It's about what happens when we choose to see each other as human beings worthy of attention, care, and love. It's about the gift that changed them all, the gift of being truly seen. And that gift, more than any fortune or fame, is what made all the difference. If a child with nothing could see what the powerful refuse to acknowledge, what are you choosing not to see in the people around you? Hit that like button if this story moved you, and subscribe for more stories that remind us what truly matters.